Everybody laughed at me. How will I get to Africa? You know, the war was raging. We didn't have any money, and I was just a girl. But my mother would say, if you really want to do this thing, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of opportunity, and never give up. The professors who told me I'd done the study wrong, the chimps should have had numbers, not names, and they didn't have personalities, minds capable of thought or emotions, because those were unique to us. That's what I was told. And that's when I knew they were wrong. Science is wonderful when it's done right. It's about knowledge. It's finding out facts. But to get your facts through inhumane behaviour, I think is awful.
What happens when you're hugging a chimpanzee like that and it seems like something deep is being communicated between you two? Are you thinking?
Not really thinking much. Just love, I suppose. We need money to live, but it goes wrong when we live for money, and that's what leads to corruption. And that's what's destroying the planet very, very fast. Well, a lot of people think having hope is crazy. Let's face it, we don't have a big window of time. Every single day you live, and you have a choice as to what kind of difference you're going to make. Of your little choices, what do you buy, what do you eat, what do you wear? If you just think those little things, and millions and billions of people think the same, the world will change.
I am here at beautiful Windsor Castle, the home of the Queen, and I've just spent the last hour speaking with the anthropologist Jane Goodall. She is the OG of scientists in the community. In 1960, she learned that chimpanzees used tools and had lots of other emotions and behaviors that really say a lot about us human beings. And in her 80s, she's still sharp as a tack, and she's talking about bigger issues these days. She's talking about the fact that we're probably consuming too many things as a species. We're overpopulated. We're not thinking about animals and the fact that we're eating them, our carbon footprints. And she travels the world working 300 days a year with her Roots and Shoots organization to teach young people to start thinking about the bigger picture. And I really was honored to sit down with Jane. She's such a special human. She gave me a big hug at the end and grunted in my ear like a female chimpanzee would do when greeting a male one. She spent time talking to us afterwards, and she's really a special, special spirit and a special human being, and has a lot of really important things to say, and she just works tirelessly, and she really is a London reeler. She's got the spirit, and she's really thinking about the bigger picture, things past her own life. And so I think you're really going to enjoy this time with Jane, very much so, and we were just so excited to finally sit down and talk to her. So that's happening here. While I'm out here at this beautiful castle, I'm also excited about all the things going on in the Academy right now. We've got crazy things happening with the Body and Mind Challenges, and our new 4-week Create and Connect cycle has started, so jump in and join us. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you in there.
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Jane Goodall, the primatologist, ethologist, and anthropologist who revolutionized the way we understand the animal kingdom by observing wild chimpanzees, our closest living relatives. In 1957, at the age of 23, you sailed to Kenya and later traveled to Tanzania to live in the wild with a colony of chimpanzees. There you made groundbreaking discoveries regarding the use of tools, hunting behavior, leadership, emotions, and language. You are a United Nations Messenger of Peace, one of the most respected members of the world scientific community. Your Roots and Shoots program inspires young people in over 130 countries, and your institute now protects over 1.5 million acres of natural habitat. Jane, welcome to London Real.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure having you here. We're actually in St. George's House today, inside Windsor Castle, the Queen's main residence, where leaders of government, industry, commerce, and charity get access to discuss matters of national interest. I'm always curious, did you always know when you grew up in Bournemouth that you were kind of destined to do big things and be in places like this?
Of course not. I was very shy, very retiring, and all I wanted to do was go and live with animals and write books about them. That was what I wanted to do, but it didn't go beyond that.
Talk to me about Dr. Dolittle. I was a big fan growing up. What was it about Dolittle that kind of got your imagination?
Well, right from the beginning, I loved animals when I was tiny. I mean, I took worms to bed when I was 1.5. I had an amazing mother who just said, well, they need the earth or they'll die, rather than get mad at me because my bed was full of earth. And so when I read Dr. Dolittle, I mean, it was everything I'd wanted. Talking to animals. I wanted a parrot to teach me. I was 8 years old when I read the story of Dr. Dolittle. And it came from a library because we couldn't afford books when I was growing up. We had virtually no money in the war. And so I read it twice under the bedclothes when I wasn't allowed to read at night with my flashlight, because I had to read it again before it went back to the library. It was the first book I ever owned. My grandmother got me a copy for the next Christmas. Still have that book.
Is it true you used to tell the children you could talk to the squirrels?
Oh, I told them I could understand the squirrels, the birds, the dogs, the cats. I told them what they said and they all believed me.
It's a bit cruel.
No, why not? I was pretty sure I understood myself.
Yeah, I think you said once it was your dog that kind of really got you to understand that animals had apathy, had emotion, had empathy.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
Rusty.
And what was Britain like in the 40s? I mean, I think a lot of us just don't even understand the war years and then the kind of poverty after. Is there any way you can kind of describe that to me?
Well, I was very young. So all I remember most vividly is, stories of people we knew who were killed. And we didn't, of course, until right at the end of the war, we didn't know about the concentration camps. And it was a time we couldn't go down, although we lived by the sea, we couldn't actually get into the sea because there was barbed wire along all the coast. And we knew about the bombs falling in London. Some bombs fell by us. They were mostly German pilots who hadn't managed to drop bombs on their target. So they wanted to drop them somewhere so that they'd be less likely to be blown up going back to Germany over the sea.
Did that affect you as a young girl, or did you just kind of get on with it?
Not really. It didn't really affect me. What did affect me was at the end of the war when I read about the Holocaust. That affected me very much.
I'm guessing that was a shock to everybody in Britain,
Yeah.
and I guess the world, when they found out about that.
Yes.
And did that change actions? Did that make you think, I had to maybe do bigger things in the world?
No, I don't think so. It just helped me to understand human nature a little better.
Okay. And then after the war, Britain was really rebuilding. So I hear stories that there just wasn't really much of anything, food-wise, commodities, that kind of thing. Do you remember?
Yeah, we had ration cards, we had clothing coupons. It was like all through the war and immediately afterwards, it was like something like 1 egg a week or something like that. But we used to get packages of food which was sent over from Australia to, from the colonies to families with children. And it was things like dried milk powder, dried eggs, and then there were the delicacies like the odd tin of peach. So if there was an air raid warning, which happened quite often, all of us in the family, we'd been given, because there were children, we'd been given one of these Anderson shelters, which was about not much higher than that, steel top, so that if a bomb fell, you'd be safe inside it, under the rubble of the house. And my sister was younger than me, and she, as soon as the siren went, she was out of bed like this and rushing to get down into the shelter. I, meanwhile, clung onto all my bedclothes. I did not want to leave my bed, and I had to be carried down with all the bedclothes. And if we were there more than an hour, as a treat, we could open a tin of peaches. That's what I remember. And also, growing up on dried egg powder, the thought of a runny egg still makes me feel sick.
Sick?
Absolutely sick, to see the slimy, the yolk and all the slur.
So you don't crave it because you didn't grow up on it?
That's right.
It's foreign to you.
Hard eggs is fine.
Okay.
Although eggs today with intensive farms, I try not to eat them. We have rescued hens at home in Bournemouth. My sister looks after these hens rescued from the battery farms. And they lay eggs for us.
Can you tell me about your mother?
My mother was one of the most amazing people. I attribute everything to her, because when everybody laughed at this idea, go to Africa, write, live with animals, write books about them, which began when I was 10, and I found this little book in a second-hand bookshop with no money to buy new books. I would save up any little penny I had for second-hand books. And I found this little book, which again I still have, called Tarzan of the Apes. And so of course I fell in love passionately with this glorious Lord of the Jungle, and he went and married the wrong Jane. So this was when my dream began, and everybody laughed at me. How will I get to Africa? The war was raging. Africa was the dark continent, very far away. Nobody knew much about it. We didn't have any money, and I was just a girl. I couldn't, why was I dreaming such nonsense? But my mother would say, if you really want to do this thing, you're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of opportunity, and never give up. I don't know that she said it quite like that in that way, but that was the message the whole way through, that I was not laughed at for having a dream like that.
Where did she get her strength? Was your grandmother very strong as well?
Very strong. My grandmother was immensely strong. And my mother's sister, older sister, she was one of the very first to qualify as a woman as a physiotherapist.
I was thinking about, being you at 10 years old and female role models, and I realized that there wasn't even a queen at that point.
Oh.
So did you have anyone to look up to?
Well, there was Florence Nightingale.
Okay.
I remember stories about her, and Madame Curie. Those were two women that we had stories read to us about them.
So that's something too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And books really spurred you. It seems books were kind of the internet of your time. It was the way.
There was radio and books. That was it.
That was it to get
no
new ideas.
TV.
Right.
Mm.
And so you fell in love with books, and you thought, I'm going to go to Africa and write books. That was kind of the plan since 10.
Go to Africa and live with animals.
Okay.
Live with wild animals. It wasn't Africa, it was the animals.
Okay.
And, I had brief times thinking about going to Canada with the wolves and the bears, and then the jungles of South America. I read a book called The Green Hell, and I was fascinated by the anacondas and things. So it was the wilderness that attracted me.
Okay.
But Africa especially, and I think that was Tarzan.
So during the war, you're dreaming of this when you can't even leave the country. We don't even know if we're going to survive. We don't know if the Germans are going to land on your doorstep. Very trying times. After that...
And we had Churchill.
And you had Churchill.
We had Churchill. I think we'd have been invaded, but for him.
Do you remember him on the radio speaking?
Oh, I remember him vividly. I remember that voice, his voice was amazing. It really, really got us through. I'm sure it did.
Got everyone through that.
Yes, I think it did.
I've listened to many of his speeches.
They were just incredible.
For people that don't understand, I mean, when you think of Churchill in those years, you know, did he make or break the survival of the country?
I think so. And it's interesting, people say, you know, that Hitler also had power of oratory, and they said if there'd been television, Hitler would never have risen to power the way he did, because he wasn't very attractive. But his voice, I'm told, was really powerful.
Right. Well, I didn't think about that. And so after the war, not a lot of money, very hard times, and yet you still have this dream, I'm going to go to Africa.
Yes.
And you're a young woman. What are people telling you now? You're in your teens.
Same thing, telling me the same. And you know, I had to get some money, so I did a secretarial course. There was no money for university. You couldn't have done university. But then came a letter from a school friend inviting me to Kenya. That was it. That was the opportunity. So I worked as a waitress for about 5 months, jolly hard work, in an old-fashioned hotel, and it was, you know, just after the war, so they were coming down from up north for a holiday by the sea, and they didn't have much money, not much brass, you know. So you had to work really hard for a week to get even a little tip, because I made sure they all knew I was saving up to go to Africa.
Crowdfunding.
Well, it didn't work terribly well, but because they didn't have much money. And I was the only non-professional in that hotel, and the others were all professional waiters and waitresses. And they resented me hugely to start with. I mean, who does she think? She's coming in, she'll be invited out and she'll just leave us in the lurch. When they found that I was every bit as or more conscientious than them, I was welcomed into this whole new, they were mostly Irish Catholic, so it was a whole new learning experience.
And if you hadn't received that letter from Africa inviting you, would that have slowed your progress getting down there, or would you have found another way?
I don't know.
Okay.
How can I tell? Yeah. I don't know.
So you save the money, you get the ticket on the boat, 3 weeks. What's that like?
It's because we should have gone through the Suez Canal, but there was that little war with Egypt.
Yes.
And the Suez Canal was closed, so the boat had to go all the way around the Cape, and they said they were really sorry, they'd have to charge a bit extra money. They'd make it as little as possible. So I had to do 2 extra weeks waitressing to make up the money to go around. But it was lovely to have that long journey, you know, with the sea changing from grey, dark, and then gradually getting bluer. And the first flying fish, that was amazing, and then a dolphin jumping.
Wow.
But then coming to Cape Town and Durban and meeting apartheid was awful. Oh, it was horrible. We landed briefly on shore.
And you could tell right away there was something.
Oh, everywhere you looked, it was, you know, whites only, slegs blanc, on every seat, on every door, and it was awful.
Wow. Wow.
Just horrible.
Wow. And that was only in South Africa. And so as you continued, that was gone.
Well, it was still, no, there was the remains of it in what they called the White Highlands in Kenya.
Okay.
And the servants were still referred to as boys. And you still heard wog occasionally, because these are the old colonial types in Kenya.
Okay.
So, of course, it became independent, but it took a while for some of the old habits to die. And Tanzania was still a colony when I arrived, Tanganyika.
Were you a pretty tough woman at that point? Did you feel like I can kind of handle things? Did people kind of size you up when you're abroad and try to intimidate you at all?
No. I think I was always quite feminine, and which was to my advantage, I think, definitely.
Okay.
You know, I think if I'd been sort of, you know, a really ugly person, I'm not sure that Louis Leakey would have welcomed me as his secretary, which is how it all began.
You said on 60 Minutes that you were a terrible flirt.
I was a flirt.
Was
I enjoyed being young and flirtatious and invited out and dinners and things.
How long were you in Tanzania before you met Louis Leakey? And how did that come
Well,
about?
I went to Kenya.
Kenya first.
Which is where he was.
Right, okay.
And I think I'd been out there about maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month, something like that, staying with my friend. And then I got a job in Nairobi because you don't sponge on your friends, you know. And that's when I heard about Leakey, and I went to see him. I just went to talk about animals. Somebody said I should, and I came away with a job. His secretary just left. It must have been meant.
And what do you remember about Louis the first time you met him?
Oh, I was completely, you know, in awe because he knew everything about animals. I mean, it was just the sort of person, just an amazing knowledge of Africa and animals. And yes, he was brought up as a Kikuyu, so he knew the local people.
Okay, is that a local tribe?
The Kikuyus, it's the sort of dominant tribe in the Kikuyu and the Maasai.
Okay. And he was impressed with your knowledge of animals.
Yes, he took me all around, asked me hundreds of questions at the museum. It was the Natural History Museum. He was very impressed.
So it was like an interview or a quiz.
Yeah, but I didn't know it was because I hadn't gone to get a job. So.
And you had got all that knowledge from reading books about animals.
Yes, and spending hours in the Natural History Museum in London as well.
Oh, in London, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so you meet him, he agrees to hire you on, you go out.
Then he takes me to Olduvai, digging for fossils. And in those days, Olduvai was totally remote. There wasn't a road, there wasn't a track. It was in the middle of nowhere. So I think the 3 weeks that I was there with one other young girl, we saw maybe 4 Maasai warriors, and that was it. There was just us. It was magic.
Yeah, you've said you really feel at peace when you're alone in nature. Was that probably one of the first times you were really that far out and really...
It was the first time I was that far out. And it was mostly, you know, when I didn't wander about on my own on the plains, but I went with Gillian, the other girl. And we met a rhino once. I mean, all the animals were there then. So we met a rhino like twice the length of this room away. Luckily, the wind was blowing from him to us. He knew there was something, but they don't see very well. So he trotted back and forth a few times, and then luckily trotted in the other direction with his tail up. And then there was the lion, the young male lion, who followed us quite a way. It was a bit scary, but very exciting.
Were you scared?
Well, funnily enough, not really. Afterwards, it was a bit more scary than at the time.
Because you didn't know?
No, there was one scary moment. Gillian and I had to take out these 2 dogs with us, Leakey's wife's dogs, one of whom was the champion of all breeds of Kenya. There were 2 Dalmatians. And Mary said, take the dogs with you when you go walking. So we took the dogs. And on this occasion, ahead of us along the trail, we're down in the gorge, Olduvai Gorge, it's just thorn bushes and things. And this mouse ran across the trail under a low branches of a tree. So the 2 dogs took off after the mouse. That's when the lion appeared behind. And of course with dogs it could be dangerous because dogs are more likely to be attacked by a lion. Humans weren't in those days, I think. But anyway, there was the lion. And we couldn't leave the dogs, and the dogs wanted to chase the mouse. And so how do you get the dogs out? We can't yell. So we finally get the dogs. And I think I put my belt around one of them, the male. Gillian gets the champion of all breeds of Kenya, and I don't know what she puts. But anyway, we get the dogs, and we climb up the side of the gorge to where it's open, because I thought that would be safest. And Gillian let go of the champion of all breeds of Kenya, who immediately went back down to the mouse. That was the scary moment, because I thought I'd have to go and get her. I couldn't just leave Mary Leakey's beloved dog. We were scared of Mary.
You might get sacked. This whole time, are you thinking, I'm going to stay in Africa the rest of my life? Are you thinking, I'll go back to England at some point? Where was your head at that point?
I didn't really think. I mean, I was at the museum, then Leakey asked me if I'd like to go and do the chimps. And that's when, of course, I said yes. But then it took a year to get the money.
Okay. And he was impressed with your coolness in the lion incident.
Yes, he was.
And thought, I'm gonna bring Jane with me too.
Well, I think that was the turning point.
Okay.
Not with him. He never came to Gombe.
Okay. So he sent you.
He sent me.
Okay.
And it wasn't allowed to be on my own. The authorities wouldn't have it. So that's when Mum volunteered.
And that's the local authorities wouldn't have it.
Yeah, the British.
Oh, the British. Okay.
Yeah.
And so Mom took the boat ride out to join you.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, she actually flew.
Okay. And the chimpanzees, I mean, do you remember when you first saw them and the feelings
Yeah,
you
they
had?
ran away.
They ran away.
Day off today, they take one look and run away.
You said at first they were scared, then they were belligerent, then they were tolerant of you. How long did the fear last with the chimpanzees?
Oh, the fear lasted for many of them. It lasted for about, I don't know, 5 months. I mean, it went on and on. So I was still watching them with my binoculars from this peak. So I was learning stuff, but from distance, until David Greybeard showed me termiting. I wasn't that close, but through my binoculars I could see him fishing for termites. And that was the breakthrough. That's what brought money in, brought the Geographic in.
Right. And that was after 5 months of observing.
Something like that. No, I think I saw that a bit before, because July, August, September, October. It was between 4 and 5 months when the termite season begins.
And did you know right away that this was something pretty incredible? I mean, when you're looking through that and you're like, wait a second, I know this is something people won't believe.
Yes, I did think that. In fact, I didn't send a telegram to Leakey until I'd seen it again twice, because I thought perhaps I imagined it.
Patience. Would you argue that's probably one of your greatest virtues?
Well, when I was 4.5, I hid for 4 hours in a hen house to see a hen lay an egg, so I was born with patience, I think.
And not many people would have probably waited and watched for so long.
No, I don't think they would.
And so you see the use of tools, you wire back to Leakey, and then it all comes.
Then the Geographic said that they would send money. Then they sent a photographer, filmmaker, who became my first husband, and the pictures went around America and then around the world. And that's when it all began.
And when you look back at that and try to figure out how that became so big, because it really was a global sensation. If it was today, you would have broke the internet, I think. I mean,
Yes, totally.
Right?
It would have gone more than viral.
I mean, what was it about you, the chimpanzees, Africa, that just made everyone so fascinated?
Well, first of all, nobody was doing it. Secondly, they said it was Beauty and the Beast, the black chimps and the fair-haired young English girl. That was attractive to people. And it was all new. People had no idea how chimps behaved in the wild. So what with me being out in the forest and the chimps and Africa, kind of romantic,
How did you like being a celebrity all of a sudden?
I hated it. I hid from the press. I was really shy.
In Africa, the press there and here?
No, not Africa. There was no press in Africa.
Okay, but when you came back here?
When I came back here.
Okay.
And then going over to the Geographic, you see.
And people called you the Geographic
Cover girl.
Cover girl. And how did that feel?
I came to resent it deeply and bitterly, but at the beginning I didn't really care.
And later
Because I was at Cambridge by that time.
By that time you were, right? And just to finish out with that, at Cambridge, you go there in '62 to get your PhD. What was that reception? I can just imagine that first couple months at Cambridge must have been very difficult.
It was horrible.
Okay. Because they're looking at you as a pseudoscientist, and then also you're the cover girl, and then you're probably one of the few women there.
Yeah, well, one, I felt the students resented me. Who does she think she is? Just because she's waltzed off to Africa, And I'm sure some of them did think that. But secondly, it was the professors who told me I'd done the study wrong. The chimps should have had numbers, not names. And they didn't have personalities, minds capable of thought or emotions, because those were unique to us. That's what I was told. And that's when I knew they were wrong, because of my dog. Rusty taught me, and the other animals I had too. So I knew they were wrong. And, the only reason I wanted the PhD was for Louis Leakey. I didn't want to let him down. I didn't want to be a scientist. So I didn't think I minded these cover girl things. But later on, when I did get the PhD, that was when I began to resent all these remarks that just because I didn't write in the accepted scientific way, and just because my ideas weren't accepted in science, that would make me non-scientific. And it's still a bone of contention. Can you feel empathy with the animals you're observing and be objective? Of course you can, but it's still maintained by many scientists that's not possible. It's not true.
It's not true.
No.
Because the scientific method is always extremely objective in the double-blind studies.
And cold.
And cold.
So my feeling is that science, which is head and no heart, is what's led to some really terrible inventions by science. And I think empathy in science is tremendously important. They did that experiment where they got students in, and they were told that they were giving a little mild electric shocks to this man inside through the glass. And of course they weren't really shocking him, but they didn't know. They thought they were. And they were told to continue and give bigger and bigger shocks. And some of them actually went on until the shock would have killed the person, and they knew it, but they were told to do it as part of the experiment, and they did it, which was a wicked thing to do, because how would the student feel afterwards? It's terrible to do that.
And what does that say about human nature?
Exactly. And science, because science is wonderful when it's done right. It's about knowledge, it's finding out facts. But to get your facts through inhumane behaviour, I think, is awful.
And your empathy was critical in the discoveries you made, the relationships you built, the things you learned about the chimpanzees.
Yes.
I would argue your feminine energy was maybe necessary in that situation.
It's not necessarily feminine. It's sort of, the good men out there in the field, they have the same sort of empathy and wanting to know and everything. Because you watch behavior, you don't really know what it means, but you have empathy, and so you think you know what it means. And that's desperately important, because once you think you know what it means, then you can start finding out if that's true. You can ask the right questions. But if you never get to that point through empathy, you can never ask the right questions.
So it's actually a critical part of the scientific method.
To me,
because there must be empathy,
critical.
There must be passion, there must be interest.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other important observations you made about the chimpanzees, you started with the tools. What were some of the other big ones now that you look back?
Maternal behaviour is one of the really important ones. Good mothers and bad mothers. Okay. Infant development, and how they develop differently. And then as time went on, realizing that the females actually learn by having their own kids. But the sisters learn if they have baby brothers and sisters. And a female who's the last born in her family doesn't know how to be a good mother, because she hasn't been able to practice with baby brother and baby sister.
Okay.
So all of those were fascinating. The fact they all have such different personalities. The fact that some males really are motivated to get to the top. And even if they get big setbacks and they're attacked as they're making this effort, they still come back when their wounds heal and try again. Others just give up and seem content to remain low ranking. and the different techniques males use to get to the top. Some is just brute strength, others use their heads.
You noticed some alpha males that had long tenures at the top, and they were more of coalition builders, or what
Coalition or brains. I mean, Mike didn't have a partner really, but no, he didn't. But he used these empty tin cans, and he would charge with up to 3 of them, 4-gallon cans, making a hell of a din, charge towards other males who all were ranked higher than him. And of course they rushed out of the way, and then they would gather and groom Mike. So he got to the top in 4 months, and that he had to defeat 11 who ranked higher than him. And as far as we know, there was no serious fight. There were no wounds, no handfuls of hair torn out. And when we took the cans away, because it was dangerous for us too, then he seemed to think, well, this was desperate. So whereas a male will normally drag 1 branch in one of his dominance displays, Mike would get 3. When a male will throw 1 rock, or maybe 2, Mike would throw 20, because he didn't have his cans anymore. So then he relaxed and realized he'd made it.
So the cans was another use of tools.
Yes, it was definitely.
Wow. And what did some of this behavior start teaching you about humans?
Well, for a long time I thought chimps were like us, but nicer. And I realized they too have a dark, brutal, aggressive side. So it sort of, I think Lewis wanted me to study the chimps because he felt it would help him better understand how early humans might have behaved. And so when you start seeing so many human characteristics in the chimps, like the gentle maternal behavior, the family bonds, the relations between older brothers and sisters, the long-term bond with the mother, this desire for dominance in some of the males, all these very human characteristics, the empathy, the grief shown by a mother when she loses her child, or a child when he loses his mother, the fact that they have altruism, that a young male will adopt an orphan even if it's not related to him, and then finding they have this warlike, brutal, aggressive behavior, and helping to understand more about some of the behaviors that we brought with us from our ancient primate past, when there were ape-like, human-like creatures, and we went one way and they went the other.
Before you found out about the dark side, do you think you had kind of romanticized their behavior a little bit?
I thought they were much nicer than us.
Okay. Which is a natural tendency, I guess.
Yeah.
I've seen, footage of you out there with them. I mean, these are big animals, potentially scary animals. Did you get over fear, or did you just not have fear?
Oh, I had fears sometimes. Luckily, the fear has never come at the point of the interaction or whatever it is. It comes afterwards. I mean, like when they first began to lose their fear, they would do these displays, and they'd be charging all around me and swaying branches, hitting my head with them. And it was very scary, but at the time, I thought, well, best thing I can do, I pretended to dig holes in the ground. I wouldn't look at them. I pretended to eat leaves, and they eventually went away. And after they'd gone, that was when I was afraid. My legs were trembling. It was very scary, really. But at the time, something comes in, and it wasn't fear. It was more, I was fed up with them. Why are they behaving like this? Horrible creatures.
But you can't react. That's the last thing you can do.
No.
I saw some video of you where I think you were in a place where there was a plexiglass separating you and some chimpanzees, and one was jumping into the plexiglass, and you said, he's just trying to get a reaction. He's trying to control his environment, which is what I guess any of us are trying to do. But he's slamming into the glass, and you're not even batting an eyelid.
Poor chimp.
I guess as an observer and a liver with the chimps, you have to be one of the best actresses in the world as well, right?
Probably.
There's also some footage of you hugging a lot of chimps, and there was one that I think had been repatriated out into the wild, and he gave you a hug. And
oh, it was a female.
Okay.
That was the most amazing thing that's ever happened. I only met her that day. She was fully adult. She'd been nursed back from near death by the veterinarian who runs the sanctuary, and she was going to go onto this island. It's not completely the wild, but it's a beautiful forest. They just have to have food supplement, that's all. So it was, Wunda now was going to go and join the others. And I was with her on the boat, and I thought, she's with people she knows, but she must wonder what on earth's happening, going into a cage, being sedated, or going on the boat. And I was trying to reassure her that it was going to be wonderful. And when she got out of that cage, and she suddenly, deliberately stops when she gets to me and comes and gives me, I think that went viral. It was amazing. We were all in tears, because it wasn't just a little hug.
No.
She kept her arms around me.
It felt like you were talking to her with your heart, something there. I felt like...
It was really absolutely extraordinary.
What happens when you're hugging a chimpanzee like that, and it seems like something deep is being communicated between you two? Are you thinking?
Not really thinking much, just sort of love, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you miss being with the chimpanzees all the time? Is it strange coming back to humans sometimes?
Well, since 1986, it's been my life, 300 days a year on the road. And, I have a task which somehow I was given the gifts to do, which is to go and talk about the chimps, but, try and find ways to save the forest, to save the wild places.
You travel 300 days a year. You just flew in from a country. You're about to go out to another one. And you've been said to say there's so much left to do, so there is this feeling of desperation. Can you explain?
Well, as I say, I was given a gift, and one of the gifts is communication, so that when I talk, people listen, and it affects them. And that's a gift. So because I know that, and because I feel it's desperately important to work with youth, young people, and so we have our youth program now in about 100 countries. We thought it was more, but it's actually about 100 countries, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And we have young people now from kindergarten through university. And it's about 100,000 active groups, and then all the young people who've grown through it, and whose attitude to environment and animals has changed. They all say so, because of having this program, which is about making things better for people, for animals, for the environment. And so because my going around triggers more and more and more people to join this, and it affects their parents, and then they become parents. And, fighting for a critical mass of youth that understands we need money to live, but it goes wrong when we live for money, and that's what leads to corruption. And that's what's destroying the planet very, very fast. We don't have a big window of time. Some people think it's too late already.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
I meet people everywhere who are kind of feeling hopeless. And some of them are depressed, some of them are angry. Mostly it's just apathy.